Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 14th of May. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with the very latest weather happenings around your part of Alaska by going to weather.gov/Alaska or, of course, using your NOAA weather radio. It's always a good time to make sure the batteries are working. The weather info line is 800-472-0391. You can find each weather service office on Twitter, NWS Anchorage, NWS Juneau, and NWS Fairbanks. And, of course, for the entire statewide, you can look at NWS Alaska. On Facebook, NWS Alaska will find the information that you're looking for there. And, of course, on YouTube. Every office has their YouTube account there. So check us out. And if you haven't poked around on social media in a while, you'll get the rest of the story in between what we're presenting here every night on Alaska Weather. And thanks again for joining us. Here's a look at the hazardous weather across South Central and the interior. Red flag warnings are what you see here posted in red across a large part of the state, maybe even about a third or so, across the Alaska Range, the Tanana Valley, all the way into the upper Kuskokwim and lower Kuskokwim valleys, the western side of the Alaska Range, South Central, and the entirety of the Kenai Peninsula and parts of Prince William Sound now, including areas around Valdez. What's the story? Well, dry winds blowing over the mountains, creating low humidity situations, and sometimes higher winds and gusts are creating that red flag warning or that increased fire danger on top of the already tinderbox conditions across many parts of southern and southwestern Alaska. So again, we encourage you to be fire-wise. If you don't know what the fire restrictions are in your community, check before you light the match. Again, it is a very important time of the year, a very dry time of the year, that we can get just a very small fire that can take off quickly and become out of control. So make sure you're doing your part in your community to keep your community safe. And once again, you can see those red flag warnings stretching all the way out toward south and western Alaska. Even some very dry conditions here around Dillingham as of last check. On the other side of things, a breakup again has been pretty tame. Around 2 o'clock this afternoon, this is the latest chart here, and the dark blue means the river is open in a large part of the Yukon and the Kuskokwim now, at least open, if not mostly open. It's the rivers up north that are still seeing a little bit of a change around the Colville area. And below Noatak, still some ice showing there as of 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you'd like the very latest updates, if you're around Noatak or perhaps Colville on the North Slope, you can go to weather.gov/APRFC or the address you see there on your screen, and the information will be updated again probably by tomorrow morning. The fire dangers we were talking about is really more than just the red flag warnings. It is an increased risk as you get into the lower and middle Yukon valleys there. The extreme fire danger seems to be just north of the Alaska Range into the Tanana Valley and also across the Kenai Peninsula. And we're getting this information from the BLM and the Alaska Emergency Coordination Center. So again, this is something that kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, and this is a little bit more to the story than what we're showing there with the red flag warning. But again, the fire danger continues to be pretty high for a large part of the state. Looking at the Bering Sea satellite picture, are we going to get any relief for this dry weather across the interior or south central? Chances are not much. Right now, low pressures across the western Bering Sea. You can see how it's tapped into at least some Pacific moisture, but that moisture feed is pretty thin and is getting squished right across the central and eastern parts of the Aleutians with high pressure working in. A lot of what you're seeing here is low stratus and fog, so there's not a lot of deep moisture that's making its way northward and certainly not working into where the problem areas are a little bit further east. Across the west, several areas of low pressure are seen there as we look at the visible satellite picture using a slightly different view than what we normally do, so you can see a little bit more of the fog. All the fog that we were talking about yesterday across south central has kind of been pushed south and east. You can see a swirl of low pressure here just north and west of Yakutat, and another wave of low pressure here really focusing on some light rain across southern parts of southeast, Hyder up into the central parts of the inner waterways. And then northward, nothing but dry conditions across southwest, the interior, and all the white you see here, just snowpack across the Chugach and the Alaska Range into Prince William Sound and the southern Kenai Peninsula, as well as the Harding Ice Field. Most of what you're looking at up north is just a few cirrus clouds floating over the Brooks Range. And then here's the meat of what is still hanging over the Bering Sea. Not a lot of moisture there, but again, you can see some of those low clouds working up through the Pribilofs. Fog will be a major part of your the rest of the week. If you're in the Pribilofs to the St. Matthew Island waters, St. Lawrence Island probably dealing with fog. And most of the central and western Aleutians stand a chance for at least a couple showers from time to time, especially for the central part of the chain and then out to the west, while eastern areas dealing with more fog than anything else. Here's a look at the weather map then. When you take the satellite picture and put the fronts on top of it, cold frontal boundary is just showing the direction of travel for that colder air mass. The cold air behind the line, and the points here, the barbs, showing the direction of travel. So in this case, cold air is trying to move its way southward. Of course, we all know that some of the tallest mountains in North America are sitting right about here. And that cold air is probably not just going to come up and over the hill. So it's going to slide eastward, and most places in the lower and middle, lower 48 are dealing with considerably colder weather than what we're talking about across the interior, southwest and south central Alaska, even southeastern Alaska. Places in, let's say, Missouri are only in the mid to upper 40s, low 50s right now. And many places in south central Alaska are in the upper 60s to low 70s. Just an impressive change thanks to that cold air, completely missing most of Alaska at this point. High pressure sitting up across central and western parts of the Brooks Range, 1,036 millibars across the Alaskan Peninsula, an extension of that ridge, holding back that next wave of low pressure. So all this energy is being focused from southwest to north and east and not moving eastward at all at this point. As we get into tonight, you can see some pockets of rainfall across central and northern parts of southeast. Wind's not terribly strong there at all, so you're not dealing with any major storm activity. This is just a wave of some moisture holding right over central and northern parts of southeast. With high pressure trying to guide this off to sea, it's not going to be a very fast mover, but you'll probably see some relief from that as we get into Friday and Saturday. High pressure extending its control out into the southwestern parts of Alaska and the central and eastern chain. And here's the remnants of that frontal boundary that we were just looking at. That's falling apart. Along that, probably areas of fog, light rain, maybe some mist. Stronger winds out across the Bering Strait, and especially St. Lawrence Island and westward into the Gulf of Anadyr and eastern parts of Asia. A better chance for precipitation across the western parts of the Brooks Range. And at times you may see that mix in with snow across the northern slope. Most likely along the Arctic coast, you'll be dealing with rain and snow up until about midnight, and then that will probably start to switch back over toward rain as you get into the morning hours tomorrow. Frontal boundary will lie right along the coastline, just north of that. Chances are most of that will be snow. South of that, a better chance for some rain. And look for a rain and snow mix into Kotzebue Sound. Most areas, though, in fact, I would expect most of the villages to be dealing with more rain than any type of mix or snow for that matter at this point. As you get into the Norton Sound region, something to consider, that shore-fast ice now is unstable, according to our sea ice desk experts there. A lot of that is melting rapidly. However, it has destabilized. Not a good idea to be out on it at this point, and things are changing quickly from Norton Sound westward. We'll have a look at the ice desk update here in just a few minutes. Here's Friday in the frontal boundary now, north of the Brooks Range. Areas of rain and snow possible from Point Hope to Point Lay, almost to about Wainwright. South of that, of course, it's going to be rain. Most areas in the interior dealing with more cloud cover than any rainfall opportunities, so conditions remain dry, and you'll notice a wave of low pressure here developing around Prince William Sound, a trough extending south of the Alaska Range to about Kodiak. As that occurs, we're going to change the wind direction just a little bit more and start dragging in a little bit more of a northerly flow. Around southeast, dry conditions are back for you, and a better chance for rain, drizzle, and fog continues across the western Bering Sea, the eastern Bering, including between St. Matthew and Nunivak Island, and south and east of the Pribilofs dealing with more fog than anything else. Temperatures now around southeast, 50s, a few places a little bit cooler, and that's pretty much where the rain was falling today. Hyder about 54, Sitka 51, Juneau 53, Yakutat 54, Prince William Sound in the 60s, Cook Inlet closer to 70 degrees in many locations. Anchorage was near 70 degrees by late afternoon, 66 in Talkeetna, upper 50s and lower 60s around Fairbanks. In the Tanana Valley, Tanana itself 55. Healy showing 60 degrees, 56 in Eagle today, 54 in Northway. Fort Yukon 54. Looks like Aniktuvik Pass was 43. The Arctic coast showing readings in the lower to mid 30s. Kaktovik 37, Barrow 32, and Atkasuk about 36 degrees I should say. Kotzebue Sound in the 30s and 40s, 43 in Shishmaref, 36 in Nome. Unalakleet 50 degrees. McGrath was showing 60, 72 in Iliamna. Once again, one of the hotter spots in the entire state, 55 around Nunivak. And upper 60s to almost 70 degrees in King Salmon, 40s around Port Hayden and Pilot Point, Sandpoint was 57 around Cold Bay and False Pass. Lower 60s for you. 47 in Dutch Harbor in Alaska. Low 40s for the Pribilofs. Adak and Atka both in the 40s, and it looks like Shemya was showing an even 40 degrees. South Central tonight, one of the warmer spots in the upper 40s. Kodiak Island also in the mid 40s tonight. Southeast mid to upper 40s, with the interior looking at temps at some places probably below freezing, especially west of Fairbanks and around Northway and Eagle. It looks like the Brooks Range will dip into the upper 20s, as well as most of the Arctic coast. 34 in Nome, southwestern areas in the 30s and 40s. The Alaska Peninsula hovering in the upper 30s and low 40s as well. St. Paul 35, just shy of 40 degrees for the central and western chain, with high temps there tomorrow only rising about 10 degrees or so. 44 in St. Paul, 60s and 70s for the interior, southwest, and the YK Delta. For southeast, look for highs in the low to mid 60s in most areas. Sitka could be a little bit cooler. 56 there in Kodiak, south central in the low to mid 60s. Again, the interior, the farther north you go up to Susitna, you get closer to 70 around Talkeetna. For northwest, look for 30s and 40s, Barrow 33 and Kaktovik 36, with Arctic Village closer to 45 degrees. Flying weather shows the dry weather continuing across the interior. Most of your pass conditions should be A-OK. Look for a wide swath of MVFR conditions across the eastern Gulf and a huge swath of IFR, mainly due to that fog and low stratus from the western chain into the Pribilofs to St. Matthew, St. Lawrence Island, and up through the Bering Strait, and hovering around Kivalina, Kotzebue, and northward there to about Point Barrow along that frontal boundary. Like I said, though, your pass conditions look to be okay. Adigan and Anaktuvik Pass both be VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should be just fine. Rainy Pass we expect to see VFR, and a beautiful day through Windy Pass. Winds should not be too bad there. Isabel Pass expected to be VFR, and for Mentasta and Tanita Pass we expect a pleasant day flying through. Portage Pass should be great going into Prince William Sound, and Chilkoot and White Pass expected to be VFR through the entire day. Your freezing levels show that warm air lifting northward, and it is nothing but dry as well. From the Arctic coast all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 feet, you can see the surface freezing line now just about to make it entirely north of the Bering Strait, dipping a little bit further south of the Brooks Range, and then back into the Copper River Basin there. A lot of warmth across a large part of Alaska. Tomorrow's icing potential, if there's going to be any, it will be along the Arctic coast. That's the greatest impact, probably below 6,000 feet, and then hit and miss across the Bering Sea through the remnants of that old frontal boundary, and then south of the chain, also below 6,000 feet. Doesn't look like there's any major impact with icing tomorrow. The ridge of high pressure shows a large amount of wind moving through along and right above that frontal boundary, a 150-knot jet pumping in that warm and dry weather up across the Bering Strait. So again, the ice condition is changing quickly thanks to this. Where's that cold going? Well, any cold right now coming out of the Arctic Ocean is making its way into the lower 48 and bypassing Alaska. Trough of low pressure also lies off of the west coast of California, and we've got a little bit more of activity here. More of a southerly push just grazing the southeastern part of southeastern Alaska. Underneath that at 9,000 feet, you can see that broad west and southwesterly flow making it across the north slope. High pressure sitting over Bristol Bay, guiding winds off the continent and into the Gulf of Alaska. And we have a little bit of a light flow coming in from the south and east off of the Pacific Northwest, making it into southeastern Alaska. Winds are pretty light out across the chain as well. But the main activity and the fastest flow seems to be up across northern parts of the state right now. 3,000 feet, no difference in that flow, as we can tell by the models tomorrow. A west and southwesterly flow, a little bit slower, 10 to about 30 knots or so, and around high pressure, a light wind coming in across the Alaska Range, only about 5 knots. Slightly faster winds coming into Norton Sound, 15 to 25 knots right over Nome, and more of an east and southeasterly flow coming across the Alaska Peninsula. Also looking at those offshore winds at 3,000 feet across southeastern Alaska, between 5 and about 15 knots or so. Turbulence potential then mainly limited to where we saw the jet stream and our frontal boundary that's falling apart. Anywhere below 4,000 feet, you're likely to run into at least some chop, and that extends across the northwest coast, through the Chukchi Sea coast, the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew, probably the Pribilofs on top of visibility issues for you, and the central and western part of the chain. Also watch for a little bit of wind here, probably some chop below 6,000 feet, anywhere from Yakutat to about Haines, all the way out to maybe Seward and just points north there to Middleton Island. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with a look at the ice edge and, of course, your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
By inserting a tube into the snowpack, hydrologists obtain a sample of the entire depth of the snow cover, which they weigh to determine how much water is in it. This method only tells the snow water equivalent for a tiny area. To measure a large area, hydrologists sometimes use a low-flying aircraft. A special sensor on the aircraft measures natural radiation emitted from soils. This harmless radiation is blocked by water in the snow. The more water contained in a snowpack, the less radiation gets through the snow. So by measuring how much radiation is blocked, hydrologists can determine the amount of water in the snow below the aircraft flight line. Once hydrologists know how much water is contained in the snow, they can more accurately predict how much water or runoff to expect when the snow melts. Hydrologists usually think of runoff as the rainwater or snowmelt that doesn't soak into the ground or return to the air through the process of evaporation. It's just waiting for a place to go. Runoff can occur on all types of surfaces: roads, roofs of houses and buildings, sidewalks, and on surfaces that are covered with vegetation. Runoff can travel along the surface of the ground, eventually finding its way into street gutters, small streams, creeks, and finally into rivers, which make their way to the oceans. Because runoff collects water from widespread areas, small amounts of rainfall, say 1 inch, can cause a river to rise many feet and sometimes flood. It is therefore important for hydrologists to study runoff and be able to forecast the types of situations where it would be a problem.
Flood prediction depends critically on our ability to estimate runoff. The amount of runoff that can occur depends on many factors. If there's a big rain, the soil will soak up as much water as it can. Any more rain falling onto this wet soil becomes runoff. Some kinds of soil can soak up more water than others.
The speed at which water moves also determines the amount of runoff. Water moves faster over surfaces such as paved streets and gutters, and slower over rough, porous areas such as lawns and other areas covered by vegetation. Also, runoff travels faster over steep slopes than over flatter areas. Rivers convey runoff to the ocean. When the volume of water exceeds the river channel's capacity to contain it, flooding occurs. The role of the hydrologist goes beyond scientific measurements, data gathering, and predicting river floods. Since hydrologic forecasts are vital to those at risk, they must be communicated.
Hydrologists work with TV and radio stations, emergency managers, and city officials to determine how to better understand and utilize hydrologic information and then communicate it to the public.
The National Weather Service communicates forecasted river levels nationwide, 24 hours a day.
National Weather Service
Timely warnings inform the public when and in what areas rivers will flood and how to avoid being caught in one. These advance warnings have saved lives and property time and time again.
Very often, what we'll do is contact a severe weather forecaster, actually at the National Weather Service office, and say, what's happening? A good many of the decisions that we in emergency management make are going to be based on what we hear from the weather forecaster.
Whatever part of the county the Weather Service tells us that the problem's going to be at with the flooding on there, or a lot of rain, or the hailstorms, that's the part of the county that we're going to put our deputies at to be able to help out the citizens.
We're not just in front of a computer anymore. We become communicators. We work with the police departments, the sheriff's departments, fire departments, and emergency managers. We become their technical resource through interactions with the National Weather Service on what they can anticipate, where they can expect the worst problems to be.
So that they can have one step up on the weather that's coming in that day.
So the hydrologist's role is crucial in letting me make the decisions to know how far we're going to have to evacuate, how much do we notify people. And the really interesting thing about the hydrologist is they give us accurate information. People don't want to get a warning that's inaccurate, because pretty soon you're crying wolf. So the hydrologist in emergency management is crucial.
Hydrologists are scientific specialists. Their forecasts are glimpses into the future, granting us precious time to prepare for emergencies, saving lives and property. Hydrologists prepare us for the effects of floods. Their forecasts are also relied upon to meet the needs of cities, small towns, industries, and others that depend on adequate supplies of water. Dynamic and evolving, the science of hydrology moves forward. Ongoing discoveries and technological breakthroughs raise new challenges, opportunities for the hydrologists of tomorrow. If you're interested in a career that saves lives, solves serious problems, and advances the frontiers of science, pursue the study of hydrology. What can you do now to become a hydrologist? If you're studying science, mathematics, and computers, you're already on your way. Go to college and take advanced studies in these subjects, as well as hydrological science. Read more about hydrology. You can start by visiting this website.
And out to the cryosphere, what's left of it across the Bering Sea. You can see a lot of holes developing there between St. Lawrence Island and the western tip of the Seward Peninsula. Norton Sound, as I mentioned, was opening up pretty rapidly. And again, according to our sea ice experts, which you can get more information from anytime at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, saying the shorefast ice is now unstable and not safe to be out on that. So if you had plans to check that out this evening, stay off the shorefast ice as it is quickly melting and quickly headed out to sea. A lot of that also melting in place. So again, the southern edge of this moving northward fairly quickly and a lot of places opening up. Make sure you check out the ice conditions again before you head out in the water. But at this point, last we heard, Nome not open yet in the harbor. So changes happening, but perhaps not fast enough for the harbor in Nome just yet. Maybe give it a couple days. Thursday's marine forecast showing light winds around southeast, anywhere from the north about 10 to 15 knots or so, more of a northwesterly flow across the southern inner waterways at Clarence and Chatham Strait, more of a northerly flow coming down through the Lynn Canal, and an offshore flow from Yakutat to about Sitka from the north and east, about 10 to 15 knots. 4-foot seas mainly across coastal areas. As we get into Friday, more of a north and westerly shift around Yakutat, a 4-foot sea expected there. 5-foot seas develop as you get out toward Gustavus and south of Sitka toward Craig and the Dixon entrance. The inner waterways is generally 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. The Lynn Canal probably dealing with more of a 20-knot wind and a 4-foot sea on Friday. Across South Central, we'll get more of a southerly and southwesterly flow coming up from Kenai and the northern parts of the Cook Inlet. 4-foot seas are expected there on Thursday. More of a light and variable flow west of the Barren Islands and into Shelikof Strait. You'll notice westerly winds, or more of a, easterly wind coming into the Barrens. Northeasterlies coming down the eastern side of Kodiak Island. 4 to 5-foot seas there, and a variable flow inside of Prince William Sound. 2-foot seas with westerlies outside. 4-foot sea heading into the eastern Gulf. And then the winds switch direction a little bit more on Friday, more of a north and westerly flow, dealing with that across the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound. 2-foot seas still on the inside, 4 to 5-foot seas on the western parts of the Gulf. Develop more of a westerly flow inside of Shelikof Strait, and northwesterlies cutting across the Barren Islands and picking up speed 10 knots to the west and 20 knots to the east with a 5-foot sea heading into the western Gulf. On the Bristol Bay side, you're looking at pretty flat seas and light and variable winds there for Thursday. 10-knot wind expected to be variable north of Cold Bay. 2-foot seas there into the Bering. And for the Pacific side, 5 to 6-foot seas, 10 to 15 knots from the north and northeast by Friday. That switches around a little bit more in Chignik, more of a westerly flow south of Kodiak Island, 5-foot seas there. And also as you head south and west toward Sandpoint and King Cove. Otherwise, a north and northwesterly flow on the Bering side. Inside Bristol Bay, the winds come up to 15 knots with a 3-foot sea for Friday. A south and southeasterly wind across the central and eastern chain. More variable flow north of Unalaska, south of Nikolsky and Unalaska. That's a northeasterly wind with a 6-foot sea. And southerlies for Kiska and Attu. 10 to 20 knots with a 5 to 7-foot sea. It becomes a little more variable with time on Friday. Southeasterly still fairly light across Kiska, but we get north and northeasterly winds on the Bering side. That's 15 to 25 knots, more of a 15-knot wind sustained on the Pacific side with 5 to 6-foot seas. Seas a little bit smaller there north of Adak and Atka. On Thursday in the west coast, a variable flow outside of Kuskokwim Bay. A southerly wind coming across the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island waters. Look for that to be 15 to 30 knots, though, and picking up speed the farther north you go. 4 to 6-foot seas are expected anywhere from St. Matthew to Nunivak Island. As you get into Friday, a little bit of a shift, a westerly flow after that frontal boundary starts to fall apart. 15 to 25-knot winds there with 4-foot seas generally from St. Lawrence Island south toward the upper Kuskokwim the Kuskokwim Bay area. 5-foot seas around St. Matthew, and variable winds still looking at 3-foot seas around the Pribilofs on Friday, and watch out for that fog. South and southwesterly flow across the Chukchi seacoast. Winds anywhere from 15 to 30 knots. More of a westerly wind at 20 knots across the Beaufort seacoast Thursday, and for Friday expect a south and southwesterly wind anywhere from 15 to about 25 knots in all areas, and just a little bit of a shift in the wind as we close out the week. Recapping tonight's weather, a front across the Bering Sea is falling apart, but along that line you'll find remnants of showers and mist, not to mention a lot of fog across the central and western Bering, especially thanks to high pressure across the mainland Alaska, Bristol Bay, and the Gulf Coast. You'll be dealing with a fairly stable weather pattern no matter what part of Alaska you're in. Across the North Slope, expect periods of rain and rain mixed with snow, especially tonight, and pockets of scattered light rain across parts of southeast. That will gradually shrink as we head into Thursday and Friday. For most in the south central and southwestern part of Alaska, warm and dry weather will continue, and a front will continue across the Arctic coast as we wrap up the week. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.